bias, exposing the propaganda, and challenging you to use your brain. It's time to tap into the truth.
Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed time to tap into the truth. Welcome to tonight's broadcast. It is just mere seconds before 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on October 16th. And it is absolutely has been a wonderful day if you are a Democrat, a socialist, or a so-called progressive. Because today is the day that the Republicans surrendered. It is, in essence, the final death throes of what we know today as the Republican Party. Conservatives across the nation who have latched on to the Republican flag for so long now know that they have been abandoned and sold out by rhinos and by establishment types, the blue bloods, the folks that really are just as progressive as some of those progressive Democrats. Folks that have a healthy dose of guilt to go along with the success that they obviously feel they don't deserve. Regardless of the reason or the rationale, today is the day that Boehner stepped up and said he's not going to stand in the way of voting on this House, on the Senate bill as it comes back. The Senate passed a, quote, bipartisan bill, which essentially gave up the fight. And by this time tomorrow, the debt ceiling will be raised and the government will be opened back up again, and there'll be nothing left for us to worry about until the next debt ceiling crisis, which has a date. The real question is, what happened? Boehner has been quoted over and over again, we fought the good fight, but we lost. I would like an explanation on how it is that he thinks they lost. Because unless you are in the Beltway, a low-information voter that only pays attention to the most hardcore liberal news outlets, or a member of the Socialist Democratic Party in this country, then you knew that the optics here worked negative both ways. Yes, the Republicans were taking a bit of a hit because there were those who were beginning to feel some pain, and as soon as the pain hits you personally, it becomes real. All of a sudden, the high-mindedness and the attitudes and the great speeches give way to the fact that, oh, wait a second, crap. I mean, that's the typical reaction, right? You see people talk a good game until it's them that's affected directly, and then all of a sudden the rules need to change. Oh, I'm perfectly okay with the shutdown until it's me that can't go into the Smokies National Park. Smoky Mountain National Park right here nearby. I'm broadcasting, of course, to you from historic Roane County, Tennessee. Roane County consists of Kingston, Harriman, Rockwood. Oliver Springs is partially in the county. We're just a few miles from Knoxville, which in turn is just a few more miles from the Smoky Mountains. So yeah, we had local people being affected. So understand, I'm aware of the argument. I'm aware of the whole situation. I work for a company outside of what I do here on my own. I work for a company that relies heavily on tourist locations, and this is the last little bit of tourism left in the season that can be counted on. Businesses were feeling a pinch. Did something need to be done? Yes. But in this case, it's the American people who lose by this surrender, because it shows once again that the Republican Party as a whole is not willing to stand its ground and take whatever heat may come for the purposes of standing on the principle. Heard a lot of other talk show hosts today either just lambaste the Republicans for giving up, which I'm on board with that. I am. There was no reason to start this if they didn't plan on standing their ground. It had to be a principled stand. Something had to give. And for those of you who maybe don't understand the conservative mindset, or who unfortunately may be caught in a situation where your source of information is tainted and spun so far to the left that it makes dead center look like an extreme right position. And yeah, that's right, I'm talking to you, MSNBC. This was about trying to reestablish some level of fiscal responsibility. But the questions become, what is next? What is the point of having elected officials at all if they're not going to represent the majority of Americans? Because no matter what polls you look at, no matter whose numbers you take into account, they're all spun to get the exact results that they want to get. In truth, the overwhelming majority of Americans do not want any part of Obamacare. Even the people who thought they were behind it, once they've gotten their first looks at it, have decided this is crazy. A lot of folks that are no friends to the right side of the political spectrum and anyone thereon have come out and said, at the very least, hey, maybe the Republicans weren't too far off base in asking for one more year delay on the individual mandate. But that's not going to happen. They couldn't allow it to happen. You know why? They can push the corporate mandates back as far as they want. And I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't see it happen again. I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen. I'm saying it wouldn't surprise me. And the reason why is, who is it that makes the biggest campaign contributions? Would that be corporate America? Hello. So you're looking at corporate America and they're saying, hey, guys, come on, seriously, give us a break. Well, okay, we'll wait until after the midterm elections to force you guys into your part of this bill. Well, you're part of this law. Why? Well, it's not because it's going to do them any good. It's not going to stop it inevitably. It will just give them one more good election cycle to get campaign contributions, because they were scared that the corporate contributions would go away. What happens if you piss off a bunch of businessmen? Well, they kind of hedge their bets, and they're going to start, just like individual citizens with their campaign contributions, they're going to pick the guy they think is going to do them the most good. And in some cases, they're just going to pick the guy that's running against the guy that just pissed them off. Sometimes it's just that simple. They figure, why risk it? But they can't do that on the individual mandate. You know why? Because number one, they don't give a rat's backside about your health care or your well-being. All they care about is collecting more money, increasing their power, and being able to take a little more control over your daily life. That's what they want. This is another great way to grab some of that control. But they also knew the longer the mandates were held out, the longer it took for them to push this on to the American people, the less likely it was to ever happen. You heard over and over again people talk about, oh, it passed the House, it passed the Senate, it's got the president's signature, oh, and even the Supreme Court weighed in and said it passed the constitutional muster test. It's settled law. There's no such thing as settled law. If you've listened to the show before, you've heard me make that comment. If you've bothered to do your own research at this point, which I always encourage you to do, then you already know for a fact that that's right. There is no such thing as settled law. The next Congress can always pass a law or remove a law from the books. When it comes to social programs, however, once they're instituted in full, it is extremely difficult to let the few people that really, really, really need that kind of help go through the pains of having that taken away from them. That's a big reason why Social Security has become as big as it has. It started out very small, very targeted, and then eventually they just started opening up more and more benefits available for more and more people. And there may have been someone involved with the creation of Social Security. There may have been someone involved with the creation of Obamacare whose heart was genuinely in the right place, who really wanted to help and simply fell into that same trap that so many bleeding heart folks do. They bought into the lie that only the government can do it. You know, our culture has been pushed into a direction where it's really easy to believe that because church attendance is down in most places across the country. Individual charities are struggling more and more each year to reach their levels, their goals for donations every year. And it's not because Americans are less charitable, it's because there is so little interaction face-to-face anymore. How many of you really know your neighbors? There was a study that was released a couple of days ago. It's making the rounds through the talk circuit now. People are briefly mentioning it. I really haven't had an opportunity to take a look at it myself yet. But the end result of this particular study was that a high percentage of people now are not capable of picking their neighbors out of a lineup. There was a time in American history where we simply were not as isolated within our own homes. We didn't stick so closely to just our little immediate circle of whatever that may be. Family, a few close friends, and certainly weren't so interdependent on the internet and social media to be our way of getting information and being connected to people. How many Facebook friends do you have? How many real-world friends do you have? How many people do you actually interact with on a daily basis? Because I got to tell you, the folks that are still having face-to-face interactions with a dozen or more people a day, those are the folks that are going to be well-suited enough and independent enough to understand you have to be reliant upon yourself. We talked about yesterday how ridiculous this story going around about the kitchen garden in the White House. Well, hopefully there's still some time to save the garden once they get the government up and going again. And it's pretty much a done deal. Last I heard, the House still hasn't voted. They had wanted to vote tonight. I don't know if they're going to get to that vote. They may have done it at this point. I've been working on the computer and focusing on some other things. Haven't had time to check. But last I heard, Boehner was wanting to vote tonight. Probably tomorrow is when we will know for sure what's going to happen. By the time most Americans wake up in the morning, they'll probably have the government shutdown ended the debt ceiling will have been averted, and the lie that the debt ceiling is still attached to default will once again be propagated and ingrained into the minds of Americans so that the next time they make that threat, no one will even question it, despite the fact that there were some voices out there that were trying to make it extremely clear to everyone that it was just a lie. And that message must have been working because they had senators and congressmen out trying to make the point that default means that we won't be able to meet all of our debt and obligations. And they started trying to spin around what we should consider to be obligations, which means debts run up by previous Congress. It even got so serious that when somebody challenged Al Sharpton on his radio show, he accused the caller for being a liar because the caller was trying to make the point that Obama, as the president, and our Congress in whole, the House and the Senate, should have already been making the kind of decisions that would be forced upon them to be made in the event of a default. Over and over again, the numbers were clear. There's over $200 million a month that are incoming to the federal government. So easily they can meet servicing of our debt, paying of Social Security, funding our military, and there's still going to be money left over. Once that point is made clear to a majority of Americans who then understand that the debt ceiling not being raised did not equal default, they had to go out and change the meaning of obligations. There are obligations that American citizens have become dependent upon, but in times of financial difficulty, budgets must be trimmed. I promise you, if you stop and think about it, you don't have a single creditor in your life that was going to accept the premise of, I can just pick and choose. They would expect you find a way to pay the bills you have. And that starts with you selecting to let some stuff go. Not popular, not fun, but if you have things going on that you don't need going on, then you've got to make it come to an end. But back to the point I was making about how there were some well-meaning folks. I have no doubt that that's the case. I would be surprised if there wasn't someone whose heart was in the right place when they were trying to build these programs that have essentially crippled the American spirit and the American soul. Ultimately, though, there are still a large number of folks that were involved in this creation and a few others that were simply following the Cloward and Piven model. Now, I'm sure by now most of the people that are listening to this show have already heard about Cloward and Piven. And some of you may have heard but not really know or understand what's meant. You just know that involves a philosophy, an ideology that was designed to destroy the Constitution, essentially, individual freedoms here in the country. They were trying to force the implosion of the American economy because they knew that would be the only way they could destroy freedom here in the state. But, you know, they weren't trying to destroy freedom per se. They were trying to create that utopian society. You know, the one that all socialists believe is possible. that they believe is real, that they believe will happen, and that they're honestly arrogant enough to believe the only reason it's never worked before is because it wasn't them in charge of it. But for those of you who aren't familiar, Cloward and Piven was actually two individuals that were college professors, big surprise, and they were teaching that America could only be destroyed from within. Only by overwhelming the system with debt, welfare, and entitlements could capitalism and the American economy be destroyed. So the plan was to make a majority of Americans dependent on welfare, food stamps, disability, unemployment, and entitlements of all kinds. Then, under the weight of the debt, the system would implode and the economy would collapse. You'd bankrupt business owners, you'd bankrupt the country. Because by bankrupting business owners, and eventually corporations as well, there are no more employers, so there are no more jobs. And when there are no more jobs, there's nothing left to give to the recipients of the welfare. Because once again, I remind you, the United States government has no money of its own. It only taxes American citizens. So every penny that they spend is either your money or your neighbor's money or someone you know. Someone in your family is paying taxes whether you are or not. Maybe you're one of the fortunate folks that's able to get back more than you pay in. Which, by the way, should appall you. And you should take the moral stand of saying, you know what, I will take back everything that I paid in because of my circumstances, but I will take no more. That would be the right thing to do, because otherwise you're just taking money from somebody else that you didn't earn, that you don't deserve, that you have no legitimate claim to. If you are out here busting your backside every single day, working to try and have a little something, what gives anyone the right, government or otherwise, to take your hard-earned money and just give it to someone else for no reason? The Cloward and Piven philosophy basically would mean that Americans would be brought to their knees, begging for big government to come save them. And then, voila, you have a new system. Socialism. But socialism is unsustainable. We've seen it over and over again. It fails over and over again. There is no success story involving socialism. Not one. I challenge anyone to point out a socialism success story. The only success that ever comes from socialism is when they see how terribly it fails, some people wake up to the fact that it just doesn't work. That's it. At any rate, I'm going to take a quick break right now, and when we come back, we will get into some of the stories floating around involving the full-on Republican surrender. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Tap into the truth. Check us out at tapintothetruth.com for our latest blog post and for links to all of our past broadcasts. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and to follow us on Twitter. That's Tap Into the Truth right here on Spreaker Radio.
Yes, that's right. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for staying with us. We're talking about the Republican surrender, and we're also talking about why that means that Americans lose. Because you're going to be told by the media and the Democratic Party, the big winners today, that America won. The people won. You're going to hear that over and over and over again, but it's a lie. And it's important that you understand not only that it is, but also why. And I'm going to challenge you to do some of your own homework again. I know if people were doing their own homework already, we wouldn't have a National Socialist Party. I'm sorry, I mean the Democratic Party. The so-called progressives are so transparent, and these people have been using the same exact playbook over and over again for at least a century. You've got a great deal of conservative groups that are out there denouncing the so-called McConnell-Reed deal, and for good reason. Most conservative groups are strongly urging Republican lawmakers not to support the last-minute fiscal deal brokered by Mitch McConnell and Harry Reid to reopen the government and raise the debt limit. The Republican leadership has completely lost its way. Not only is this proposal a full surrender, it's a complete surrender with presents for the Democrats. That statement was made by FreedomWorks President Matt Kibbe. FreedomWorks, a D.C.-based group that organizes Tea Partiers, and that's not all they do, by the way, but that's the description in the article, is urging lawmakers to vote against the deal and will use the vote to score lawmakers on its 2013 economic scorecard. The deal agreed to by Mitch McConnell, the Senate Republican leader, and Harry Reid, the Democratic leader, would extend the debt limit until February the 7th, and would fund the government until January 15th at sequester levels. The deal includes new income verification measures for those receiving Obamacare subsidies, but it doesn't include some of the anti-Obamacare measures conservatives have been pushing for, including delaying or defunding the law or killing special subsidies for lawmakers. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. Barack Obama himself said early today and the day before that if any deal included the forcing of him, his family, and then in the last second he thought to add Senate or House members, that he would veto that bill. So, again, I want you to ask yourself this question. This is definitely a use your brain moment. If this deal is so freaking good for all of us, why isn't it good enough for him? Just a simple question, and it's one that you should be asking. And you should be asking your senators. You should be asking your congressmen. You should be sending emails to the White House, and you should be asking those little flunkies that will be answering it because, you know, Barack's far too busy. The House and the Senate did take up this proposal. The Senate passed it easily. And like I said before airtime, I had not heard whether or not the House had gotten their vote together or not, but I fully expect that by this time tomorrow, we'll be talking about the government being opened back up. The debt ceiling crisis averted. For another few months, anyway. We talk about presents. One such present, one such really interesting question mark that's involved with this, Another reason you should be wondering what was really going on in this deal, this budget deal includes a $174,000 payout to a widow of a millionaire senator. Buried inside the budget deal, and I'm going to keep saying this because I want to drive the point home, brokered by Mitch McConnell and Harry Reid, there's a payout to the millionaire widow of the late Democratic Senator Frank Luttenberg. Now, I'm getting this from the Daily Caller in case you're wanting to look up the article specifically. I'm sure you can find this at the Blaze and who knows how many other places by now too, because once this gets out, it is out there. You can even find it at Tap Into the Truth Facebook page. I've got a link to this particular article. But the Daily Caller obtained a copy of the draft legislation and agreed to, by the Republican and Democratic leaders of the Senate, the agreement would reopen the government, raise the debt limit, but it also authorizes an expenditure. Notwithstanding any other provision of this joint resolution, there is an appropriated for payment to Bonnie Eldenbart Luttenberg, widow of Frank R. Luttenberg, late a senator from New Jersey. $174,000. The 89-year-old New Jersey Democrat died this past summer. USA Today reported last month that the proposed one-time payment to Bonnie is equivalent to a full year's salary for the senator. It's a long tradition of Congress to make such expenditures to widows. But is this expenditure necessary? I mean, the net worth of Luttenberg at the time of his death is $56.8 million. According to the local newspaper there, they claimed that the widow was unaware of the expenditure being put into the bill. I'm sure most reasonable people, whether you vote Democratic or Republican, would not expect such a payout. She was quoted in an interview as saying, "I just learned about this recently in the news. I don't want to comment on it until I make some decisions about how to handle this. I didn't even know I was getting this money." Unlike the taxpayer-funded stipend for his rich widow, Luttenberg's vast fortune was earned in the private sector. You know, that's where millionaires are actually made. Government has never made anyone rich unless you were a politician getting a backroom deal. Before entering politics, the late senator spent many years running the payroll management colossus Automatic Data Processing, where he started as a salesman and ended up as CEO. So he actually had one of those great American success stories. He started down at the bottom, he worked his way up, he did the things, he showed up, he did the job, he did it well, and he got to move up. Meanwhile, you've got John Boehner, who went out there and said that there's no reason for the GOP to vote against the Senate bill. Now, I don't know about you guys. I'm assuming the majority of you, if you're listening to this show, are probably conservatives. A lot of you may very well be staunch Republicans. I'm not as loyal to the party as I am to the concepts of fiscal conservative government. Smaller government is better government, and charity is the responsibility of the folks at home. But in the meanwhile, I'm going to take up what Mr. Boehner had to say and what Mr. Cruz had to say when we come back from these quick, brief messages. Well, I'm going to say messages because there is one message, but basically I'm just going to take a quick break again. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Thanks for being here.
Tap into the truth. Check us out at tapintothetruth.com for our latest blog posts and for links to all of our past broadcasts. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and to follow us on Twitter. That's Tap Into the Truth right here on Spreaker Radio.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Thanks for staying with us. Always appreciate everyone for listening, and I definitely know that this modern age, time is of the essence. One of the great things about being able to podcast this as well as being here live is knowing that the audience that I'm reaching right now is sacrificing part of their lifetime, but you also have the opportunity to go back and hear the rest of this show and all the other shows at your convenience, at your leisure, which unfortunately still isn't as much as it used to be. So thank you. I do appreciate it. Also, quick reminder, I always like to throw this out. You can find Tap Into the Truth, both this and the Blog Talk versions of the show, at iTunes. You can find both versions of the show podcasted at tunein.com. Blog Talk version of the show is also available at stitcher.com. Love those apps. Love the websites. They're all great. And if you're involved with those, I'm sure you're already aware of that. But let's jump right back in. Time is getting short for tonight. Despite receiving very few concessions from Democrats, I'm not sure that there was actually any, but we'll continue. Speaker of the House John Boehner said Wednesday, that's today, there was no reason for Republicans to block a deal forged in the Senate to raise the debt ceiling and reopen the government. Quote, "There's no reason for our members to vote no today." This was Boehner speaking on Cincinnati's WLW radio. Really funny. No mention. He was talking on the Billy Cunningham show, okay? Bill Cunningham, great American, great conservative voice. He was the guy who actually brought to the forefront Barack's middle name, okay? He's one of these voices, if you're wondering, who made sure that everyone in America knew that Barack's middle name was Hussein. That's the guy. So if you haven't heard of Billy Cunningham, or if you haven't had a chance to listen to him, he's worth a listen. Don't know why they didn't mention the fact that Billy Cunningham was the guy that was conducting this interview. But at any rate, Boehner went on to say that the House has fought with everything it has to convince the president to engage in bipartisan negotiations aimed at addressing our country's debt and providing fairness for the American people under Obamacare. That fight will continue, but blocking the bipartisan agreement reached today by the members of the Senate will not be a tactic for us. Now, the bottom line is that the deal forged by Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, Kentucky, pay attention, raises the debt ceiling through February 7th and funds the federal government until January 15th. It sets up a conference committee to hammer out a budget. Like these people know what a budget is. They actually need to pass a budget. That's what they need to do. The Senate Democratic leadership said that the Senate will vote on the bill later on Wednesday. But that was transpiring during a noontime, or close to noontime, radio interview. Boehner in his statement argued that not supporting the deal would be more harmful than supporting it. I'm not sure. In addition to the risk of default, why is he propagating this lie? Doing so would open the door for the Democratic majority in Washington to raise taxes again on the American people and undo the spending caps in the 2011 Budget Control Act without replacing them with better spending cuts. How so, Mr. Boehner? How so? Republicans have backed away from the calls to delay or defund Obamacare over the past week, as tomorrow, Thursday's deadline, set by the U.S. Treasury to raise the debt ceiling, got ever closer. They got scared. That's really all this came down to. In the meanwhile, everyone wanted to know immediately what Ted Cruz thought, so he was bombarded by media attention. But Texas Senator Cruz, who has led the fight against the Obamacare law in the Senate, said that he will vote against the last-minute fiscal deal brokered by Harry Reid and Mitch McConnell. I told you before, I'm going to keep mentioning both their names forever. You guys need to pay attention. These are the people responsible for bringing this monstrosity into your life. Said he would vote against this deal because it doesn't do anything to protect people from Obamacare. Quoted as saying, the Washington establishment has cut a deal. Cruz lamenting during a gaggle of reporters surrounding him as he left a meeting of Republican senators. He was also quoted as saying, the focus is and should be on the substance of providing real relief for the American people. This deal doesn't do that, and that's why I intend to vote no. Didn't matter. But that was Cruz's reaction. And the one thing that you really can count on is that Cruz means what he says there. He hasn't been there long enough to be corrupted yet. He is a true fiscal conservative and a Tea Party guy. And Tea Party is not a bad word. You can ask any of my friends over at teapartycommunity.com. Tea Party is a good thing because it means you want to return to constitutionally limited government and fiscal common sense. The default would have forced the government to do the one thing it's refusing to do now, and that is actually make choices about how it's going to spend its additional money. Meet its obligations first, make choices about the rest. The only reason you have to keep raising the debt ceiling is because you're still not intending on living within the means. And when your means are well over $200 million a month, there ought to be some room in there to make a snippet or two to your spending. I wouldn't get a pass on it in my life. You wouldn't get a pass on it in your life. You shouldn't let these guys do away with it. But watch for this. This will hurt the Republicans far more than standing up would, because before they were standing on principle and doing the right thing and showing a spine. Now they've completely capitulated on everything and they have no grounds to stand on when it comes time to negotiate these things again. Because they have proven, once again, they will not stand up for the principle, and they will not stand up to protect the American people from this onslaught of tax after tax and the Cloward-Piven effect that's intended to destroy our nation. Stand up, people. Wake up. Start paying attention. That's tonight's show. I've got to stop there, but this is one, if I got rolling on, I could keep going, and I guess you could tell that already. But I'm going to tell you this much. As usual, don't take my word for it. Definitely don't take their word for it. Do your own research, use your brain, and always be ready to tap into the truth. Have a great night, everybody.